the University of Arizona Press. Welcome to our event, the Diné Reader, an anthology of Navajo literature. The Diné Reader is a first of its kind anthology gathering writers from across generations to highlight the depth, the breadth, and the beauty of Diné writing. The book includes poetry, fiction, and prose, as well as short biographies, photographs, and interviews with the writers. It touches upon a rich array of themes, including home, history, identity, historical trauma, language, the environment, and inequality. U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo calls the Diné Reader, quote, essential to American literature. The editors who assembled this amazing anthology are Esther Belin, Jeff Berglund, Connie Jacobs, and Anthony Webster. Esther G. Belin is a faculty mentor in the low residency MFA program at the Institute for American Indian Arts. Her poetry collection, From the Belly of My Beauty, won the American Book Award from the Before Columbus Foundation. Her latest collection is called Of Cartography. Jeff Berglund is a professor of English at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. His books are numerous and include Indigenous Pop, Native American music from jazz to hip hop. Connie Jacobs is professor emerita at San Juan College. She's the author or editor of several books, including the forthcoming book, Literary Sovereignty, Essays on the Continuing Indigenous Literary Aesthetic. And Tony Webster is a professor of anthropology at the University of Texas at Austin. He's the author of Intimate Grammars and Ethnography of Navajo Poetry, among other books. I am very, very pleased to be here to welcome all of you and pass the stage to the book editors. Thank you.
It's so wonderful that you could all join us tonight. And I wanted to say thank you to Kristen and the editorial team at University of Arizona Press for making this event possible and for bringing this book out into the world. Incredible thanks go to my colleagues, my co-editors, and to all of the writers who agreed to participate and have their brilliant work included in this collection. I wanted to provide a brief overview of what we'll be doing tonight. Initially, my colleagues Connie Jacobs and Esther Belin will be talking about what inspiration we had for this book, how we conceived of it, who our imagined readers are. Then I'll pass it to Anthony Webster, my colleague as well, who will talk about the history of Diné writing. And then I'll come back and talk about some of the unique features of the book before we turn to what will be an incredible roster of writers who will be reading from their work as we move through the event tonight. So we'll be turning then to writers including Luci Tapahanso, Laura Tohe, Irene Hamilton, Tina Deschenie, to Orlando White, Sherwin Bitsui, Jake Skeets, and Bojan Lewis. I'm probably leaving someone out. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Connie and Esther.
Good evening. Inspiration for the book. All four editors have worked in and have taught Diné literature and culture. And so the anthology in this way was inevitable. I was teaching at San Juan College in Farmington, New Mexico, which has about 1/3 student population that is Native, and most of the Native students are Diné. I regularly taught the poetry of Esther Belin and Luci Tapahanso in my classes. And after one such class, a young man came up, Diné man, and approached me with such a perplexed look on his face. He said he didn't know that there were Diné writers. He told me that at Kirtland High School, which is very near the reservation, he was taught what I call the Great Whites, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, and Steinbeck, but never Diné writers who were living all around him. This is when I knew I wanted a book that would address that void. Later, at a Native American literary symposium, I approached my colleague, Jeff Berglund, at Northern Arizona University, which is also a school with a significant Diné student population. We talked about how we could provide better access to our students to Diné literature, and the answer was obvious: a book on Diné writers. But we both knew that two non-Native academics needed help with this enormous cultural undertaking. Both of us were friends with Esther Belin, who agreed to join the project, and she became the heart and the soul of this book. She brought on Anthony Webster, a linguistic anthropologist whose field work in Navajo poetics on the Navajo Nation brought him into contact with many of the writers we feature. Each editor brought their knowledge and commitment to this book, which made it a reality after many years. I'd like to end with, as a note, the young student who approached me about not knowing there a writer himself, and he's featured in the anthology. His name is Byron Aspis.
I'd like, if we could, just pause for a minute. Before we go on, I have, it's my deepest honor and privilege to introduce to the audience Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez and First Lady Phefelia Nez, who are joining us here tonight. President Nez, if you're here, we'd love to see you. I think we need unmuting. President Nez.
All right, there we go.
Yay.
If you want to see me, you might want to allow the video to work as well. But I guess there we go.
Are.
Whoever's the facilitator, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your event, and thank you for the invitation. And I do apologize. The First Lady is right now writing her speech for the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden's visit. And we were planning and doing a lot of preliminary work, and I apologize for getting on this discussion late. And, you know, as you know, I'm sure you know by now, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden will be here on the Navajo Nation tomorrow. And we are looking forward to her visit on behalf of the Navajo people and all the Navajo writers that are on the Zoom today, or is this WebEx? But I just wanted to say thank you to Jeff and Esther for allowing me to be on the call, and many others. You know, I wanted to hear a little bit about the Anthology of Navajo Literature. So she kodo o hehe nihidini do de la shikedo shibna. Je de neni klido de neshi de nache ekon nalsos buka de le nihina antiendo kodoshi be hada inolna nigi sabe nas kodejne chun he do the neni kliba blush like anils ko the ni kligo ekna nihina nishidele so ba nha hens no dishne kodo shikino hlini she shin slot nessa ni bashchi to the chini ida shchiro tchini ida shnala so yat en hidini dole shikiro shna shalshin hlini just had to say a few words to my Navajo relatives, that the 12 Navajo authors that are a part of the anthology, and I'm sure many, many more, sharing our way of life and our worldview, our lens, our perspective. And sometimes it clashes with the dominant way or the dominant society. But in our eyes, we're dominant society too. So it all depends on what lens you are looking through. And for Indigenous people, these authors are giving you a glimpse of how Navajo sees things. And sometimes, you know, those of us especially that grew up with the Navajo language or Navajo speaking first, you know, that's how we think Navajo. And then we have to interpret it in our mind to the English language. And sometimes it conflicts with other ways of thinking. But I want to say a special thank you to Birchbark Books, the Minneapolis bookstore. Maybe one day I'll write about Navajo government. And since I do have a front row seat for over 20 years, I think the last book that was written was in the 90s, David Wilkins' Navajo Government Political Experience. There's a lot has happened since the 90s. And you know, kinship is how I relate to everyone today. And of course, it's no secret too that the Navajo Nation has been hit hard by this pandemic, but it also magnified the resilience in Indian country. We didn't roll over and give up during the time that we didn't get relief directly. You know, that relief was for all citizens, US citizens throughout the country, the CARES Act funds, but yet 574 tribes had to wait for that direct relief. And we even had to take the federal government to court just to get our share of resources. But again, we took it upon ourselves, and we took it upon the Navajo Nation's way of life teaching to get us through this pandemic. And, you know, yesterday, we have had, as of yesterday, had 10 no deaths in 10 consecutive days, and low numbers here. And, you know, we have worked together to fight this monster. And some of these stories that you'll be receiving, it talks about the monsters that plague the Navajo people. You know, I grew up with hearing stories of monsters called old age, hunger, poverty, lice, and how the hero twins came and helped push back these monsters, you know, having the armor, having the weapons to fight off these monsters since time immemorial. And today we're dealing with modern day monsters. We got alcoholism, drug addiction, suicidal thoughts, health issues, and many others. And now we got COVID-19. And I think the stories and the writing that is being shared with you, our way of life thinking has helped push back on many of these monsters in society today. You know, I'll give you one example. You know, wearing a mask is not a political statement. It's about your armor. Staying home. And those of us that are Navajo, the water is at home. And that's the safest place to be from these monsters. And it's not about restricting no one's freedoms. It's about looking at the greater good in our society. And I think utilizing our way of life teaching has helped push back on this monster called COVID-19. no protests, holding up signs saying you're not going to force me to wear a mask. It's not about individualistic as you read some of these writings from our Navajo people. It's about the greater good, which is protecting our families, protecting our communities, and protecting our nation. And that's evident, and it shows today with the way the Navajo people has pushed back on this pandemic. And I commend the Navajo people for honoring and respecting their public health professionals and their leaders through these trying times. And I just wanted to share that with you and give you again a glimpse of our worldview, and appreciate the many authors that are on the web and that have contributed to this writing, this anthology. We got Luci, Tapahanso, Laura Tohe, and Black Horse Mitchell, Irvin Morris, Sherwin Bitsui, Tina Deschenie, Irene Hamilton, Bojan Lewis, and many, many others. And by putting it in writing, it will inspire and encourage the next generation after us, and to bring hope into our society when some have lost hope. And I appreciate everyone being a part of this this book, this anthology that will always be handed down from one generation to the next, and also to share that we are a strong people and we are all in this together. If you put your hand up, I always say this, if you put your hand up, we all have 5 fingers. And the Navajo writers know what that's all about when we say in the Navajo language, that's the 5-finger beings. And it doesn't matter what color your 5 fingers are. We're all 5-finger beings. And we're able to help each other out. And I've seen some great stories of how people have helped each other out through these trying times with this pandemic. And I first too want to say to all of you, you are a part of magnifying resilience and putting hope, returning hope back to some of our Navajo citizens through your writing. So thank you for the opportunity to say a few words here, and I look forward to hearing and listening more of today's discussion. And I got a letter, and I'm looking forward to, the email. I'm looking forward to this book and to read more of your stories that are compiled. And thank you so much. God bless each and every one of you. Hela.
Thank you so very much, President Nez. We really appreciate your words and your time tonight. Thank you for joining us.
President Nez, we are honored by your presence and your support of this important book. We are hopeful that our Navajo Nation leadership will continue to support Diné literary contributions and scholarship. I'm Esther Belin, and I am coming to you live from Four Corners, just east of the Bensaw, outside of Durango, Colorado. And I will continue with our introduction about the book and the need for it, the significance of it. The more we celebrate the writers contained within this book and those significant contributions of the Navajo language, the more we strategically chip away at the bedrock foundation of systemic imperialism that has covered over Diné contributions. More well known is the contribution of the code talkers during World War II. And as a writer, I continue to be impacted by statements from our headmen at Bosque Redondo, those orators who spoke in Diné through a double language barrier of translation, using one translator to go from Navajo to Spanish, then using another to translate from Spanish to English. The process slow and the outcome uncertain. That sentiment is one I have often felt as we 4 editors committed to this project. We chipped away to unify this project for one major goal, to create a book for Diné writers, to plant seeds for future writers, and to nourish and support current writers. Our history within poetics branches off from the main stock, which is our language. We walk on our own bedrock path of prayers and songs and stories. This book is the contribution to that continuity. We 4 editors also share this book with the world, to be the translator, to translate the inarticulate, the difficult, thus allowing Diné to heal from the trauma of forced education and other detrimental governmental policies.
So I'm gonna say something briefly about the history of Diné writing. I want to thank as well President Nez for being here and for his words. I feel humbled and honored to be a part of this event and the book as well. We often tell ourselves in the stories we tell about our lives that we are somehow the protagonist of such stories. But I feel very much tonight, and gladly so, a secondary player, someone who swells the progress or advances a scene or two. And so to advance the scene, my task to say something about the history of writing, and particularly creative writing among Diné. Some of the first poetry written in English by Diné could be found in those boarding schools, and we include some of this from the 1930s, written by young Navajo school children at Tohe and published in the Bureau of Indian Affairs publication Indians at Work. The goal, for the teachers anyway, of such writing was to teach young Navajos English, the idea being that poetry was easier than prose. Poetry is a means of learning English. The students, on the other hand, took the poetry as an opportunity to say something else, a critique of the boarding school and of the power of poetry to say something rather vital. And so here's one of those poems. It's titled If, and it's credited to a collection of Diné school children. If I were a pony, a spotted pinto pony, a racing, running pony, I would run away from school, and I'd gallop on the mesa, and I'd eat on the mesa, and I'd sleep on the mesa, and I'd never think of school. Diné continued to write in English and after this, and so poetry in the 1960s was published, for example, in the Navajo Times, and in 1967, Black Horse Mitchell published Miracle Hill, written while Mitchell was a student at the Institute of American Indian Arts, an important hub for much Diné writing. And more writing followed, the works of Luci Tapahanso, of Laura Tohe, of Shoni Allen, of Irvin Morris, of Gloria Emerson, until we reach today and the wonderful collection of Diné writers, many of whom write in English or in combination with Diné Bazad. The story of written Diné is slightly different. The first writing of Navajo was by missionaries and anthropologists, and it was aimed not at Diné, but at other missionaries and anthropologists. But starting in the late 1930s, Diné linguist William Morgan and non-Navajo linguist Robert Young worked on a writing system for Navajos. The system is still in use today, and materials began to appear in Diné in the 1950s, and by the late 1970s, Nia Francisco had published a poem in Diné in the journal, appropriately, College English. Other poets in the 80s and then the 90s were writing as well in Navajo, Rexley Jim, Elise Neuendorf, and later Laura Tohe. And as our book shows so well, more Diné writers have emerged and continue to emerge, writing in a variety of languages. This work, public-facing work, work meant to be shared, and to say again, something rather vital.
Thank you, Tony. I wanted to speak briefly about some of the unique features of the book, and also ask an awkward question to everyone in the crowd. Are any of you Irvin Morris? On the Zoom, we can't see if Irvin is with us, and I thought I would just put it out there. If you're under another name, we need to change a feature on your settings so you can join us for the reading, Irvin. And try to communicate in chat if that is the case. So awkwardness aside, I wanted to talk about some of the unique features of the book before we turn it over to the writers here on Forward. The book features 33 Diné writers, many of whom have celebrated award-winning and distinguished careers. We were fortunate that every single writer enthusiastically responded to our request to be included. And we were also fortunate to work with the family and estates of 2 writers who are no longer with us. Our cover, which we think is just gorgeous, designed by Lee McDonald at the University of Arizona Press, features a painting by Shanta Begay, who is generous enough to allow us to use his painting with glowing words as the cover. In the interview that accompanies his writing in the anthology, he discusses a number of paintings he's created that feature young boys and men reading, which are in many cases versions of himself as he grew up reading books while sheep herding. In fact, he also kept what he called library trees where he stored books. The book also features a beautiful foreword by Sherwin Bitsui, award-winning poet and now my colleague at Northern Arizona University, which speaks about the strength and the beauty of Diné writing and the ways that it powerfully pushes and resists some of the misrepresentations of Diné people, of Navajo people. We were also able to commission from Sierra Ed a new detailed map of the Navajo Nation and Dinéta more specifically. The introduction, co-written by my colleagues Esther, Tony, and Connie, traces the history of Diné writing in English. Tony shared with you some of that, and we also situate it within a broader context of writing by Indigenous peoples in North America. It also has a particularly unique feature, a beautiful opening letter from Esther to Diné readers specifically. Within the book, accompanying all of the writing by each writer, we provided a comprehensive biography and an interview that we conducted specially for this book with each of the writers. The book is organized in chronological fashion based on each writer's publication history. The book is accompanied also by a chronology written by esteemed historian and a dear friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Nez, and she's constructed a chronology of Diné history that is punctuated, especially in the late 20th century, with important moments related to Navajo literature and publishing. We also include supporting materials for teachers, created by longtime educator on the Navajo Nation, Michael Thompson, who's Muskogee. He's also married to one of our contributors who you'll be hearing from later tonight, Tina Deschenie. Michael helped us create resources to support teachers and their adoption of this book for middle, high school, and college level classrooms. And then finally, the book closes with a comprehensive primary bibliography of writing by Diné writers, along with a comprehensive secondary bibliography of criticism on or related to Diné culture or history or Diné literature. Just checking in on the chat to make sure that my awkward call out didn't get a response. It did not. We hear there are winds up in Saley that are as strong as the winds down here in Flagstaff, where I am tonight. Because of that, I'd like to now turn it over to Connie, who will introduce our first writer reading tonight. Connie.
All right, I'm very privileged to be introducing Luci Tapahanso, who is one of the founding writers of the contemporary Diné literary tradition and one of the most well-known, with 6 books of poetry and 3 children's books. In 2013, she became the inaugural poet laureate for the Navajo Nation. Luci?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was here. So I was saying thank you to Connie and to everyone who has a part in had a part in putting together this book, and then also this evening's event. I see. She Luci Tapahanso and she to the Bojan Schlindo to the Chini Bashichin dash cheatney dash che Dawkins the cheatney dash the Nale. Tohe nasha not Ani Nez dent nasha could out the next song. So I'm very proud to be with you this evening. I'm speaking to you from the homelands of the Kaw, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, and other of our other Plains relatives who reside in Kansas and whose ancestors are from this area around Lawrence, Kansas. Connie mentioned the inaugural Poet Laureate honor, and I want to just say that it's very much an honor for my family, my parents in particular, and my relatives. To be recognized in that way very much speaks to our love of language as Diné people, and our love for the land and all that arises from that, as well as the sky and our sacred mountains, water bodies, animals, plants, and all other living things that sustain and live on the Nebikaya. This evening, I'm going to read one poem for you. It's called In 1864, and it appears in the Diné Reader. In 1864, over 8,000 Navajos were forced to walk from the Netka to Bosque Redondo in southern Arizona, a distance of 300 miles. They were held for 4 years until the US government declared the assimilation attempt a failure. More than 2,500 died of smallpox and other illnesses, of depression, severe weather conditions, and starvation. The survivors returned to the Nebikaya in 1868. While the younger daughter slept, she dreamt of mountains, the wide blue sky above, and friends laughing. We talked as the day wore on. The stories and highway beneath became a steady hum. The center lines were a blurred guide. As we neared the turn to Fort Sumner, I remembered the story. A few winters ago, he worked as an electrician on a crew installing power lines on the western plains of New Mexico. He stayed in his pickup camper, which was connected to a generator. The crew parked their trucks together and built a fire in the center. The nights were cold and there weren't any there weren't any trees to break the wind. It snowed off and on, a quiet, still blanket. The land was like he had imagined from the old stories, flat and dotted with shrubs. The arroyos and washes cut through the soft dirt. They were unsuspectingly deep. During the day, the work was hard and the men were exhausted. In the evenings, they went to the nearby town to eat and drink a few beers. He fixed a small meal for himself and tried to relax. Then at night, he heard cries and moans carried by the wind and blowing snow. He heard the voices wavering and rising in the darkness. He would turn over and pray, humming songs he remembered from his childhood. The songs returned to him as easily as if he had heard them that very afternoon. He sang for himself, his family, and the people whose spirits lingered on the plains, in the arroyos, and in the old windswept plants. No one else heard the thin wailing. After the third night, he unhooked his camper, signed his time card, and started the drive north to home. He told the guys, "Sure, the money's good, but I miss my kids, and it sure gets lonely out here for a family man." He couldn't stay there any longer. The place contained the pain and cries of his relatives, the confused and spattered spirits of his own existence. After we stopped for a Coke and chips, the storytelling resumed. My great aunt always started the story saying, "You are here because of what happened to your great grandmother long ago." They began rounding up the people in the fall. Some were lured into surrendering by offers of food, clothes, and livestock. So many of us were starving and suffering that year because the Balagana kept attacking us. The Kit Carson and his army had burned all the fields, and they killed our sheep right in front of us. We couldn't believe it. I covered my face and cried. All my life we had sheep. They were like our family. It was then I knew our lives were in great danger. We were also afraid of that man, Redshirt, and his army. Some people hid in the foothills of the Chaska Mountains and in Canyon Deschenie. Our family talked it over, and we decided to go to this place. What would our lives be like without sheep, crops, and land? At least we thought we would be safe from gunfire and our family would not starve. The journey began and the soldiers were all around us. All of us walked. Some carried babies. Little children and the elderly stayed in the middle of the group. We walked steadily each day, stopping only when the soldiers wanted to eat or rest. We talked among ourselves and cried quietly. We didn't know how far it was or even where we were going. All that was certain was that we were tired, and soon the journey was difficult for all of us, even the military, and it was they who thought all this up. We had such a long distance to cover. Some old people fell behind, and they wouldn't let us go back to help them. It was the saddest thing to see. My heart hurt so to remember that. 2 women were near the time of the births of their babies, and they had a hard time keeping up with the rest. Some army men pulled up behind a huge rock. and we screamed out loud when we heard the gunshots. The women didn't make a sound, but we cried out loud for them and their babies. I felt then I would not live through everything. When we crossed the Rio Grande, many people drowned. We didn't know how to swim. There was hardly any water deep enough to swim in at home. Some babies, children, and some of the older men and women were swept away by the river current. We must not ever forget their screams and the last we saw of them. Hands, a leg, or strands of hair floating. There were many who died on the way to Webster. All the way we told each other, we will be strong as long as we are together. I think that was what kept us alive. We believed in ourselves and the old stories that the holy people had given us. This is why, she would say to us, this is why we are here, because our grandparents prayed and grieved for us. The car hums steadily, and my daughter is crying softly. Tears stream down her face. She cannot speak. Then I tell her that it was at Bosque Redondo that people learned how to use flour, and now fry bread is considered to be the traditional Navajo bread. It was there that we acquired a deep appreciation for strong coffee. The women began to make long tiered calico skirts and fine velvet shirts for the men. They decorated their dark velvet blouses with silver dimes, nickels, and quarters. They had no use for money then. It is always something to see, silver flashing in the sun against dark velvet and black hair. Thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to say that I realized as I was reading this that I'm in Lawrence, Kansas now, where my husband and I lived for 10 years. And I wrote this poem as we were driving back and forth one of our trips. And I'm reading it here in Lawrence, Kansas again. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Luci. That was beautiful. I wanted to just pause for a moment and recognize we now have First Lady Phefelia Nez in the audience. And I wanted to say hello and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Yes, I'm finally joining all of you. It's been a busy, busy day, but I'm glad to be here and just listening to Luci share her words. And that is, you know, you always stir the emotions. It's powerful words that you share. Thank you. And it's good to hear your voice again and hear you reading one of your pieces like you had. So we're very grateful to be here listening to all of you and being a part of this like you had.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I think we'll continue.
Okay. It's my great pleasure to introduce Laura Tohe. She is the author of numerous books, including No Parole Today, and more recently she's written 2 librettos. She is the current and the second poet laureate of the Navajo Nation, and so it's really a great pleasure to introduce Laura Tohe.
Thank you. And I just want to also express my gratitude to all the editors who helped make this Diné Reader a reality. It's so wonderful to see so many of our nation full of writers and poets and fiction writers represented in this book, the Diné Reader. So I want to thank Esther, Jeff, Connie, Anthony, and Sherwin for making this book a reality, and very proud of all the writers that are represented in this book. I know it's going to have a long life. And I'm just going to introduce myself too in the Navajo language. Skeets, Belin, Tohe Jitni Bashchin, John I Twatlana Dashi Chado, my Deschenie Dashanala. Koto is Sanchlan. I also wanted to say something about the poet laureate. I'm the second poet laureate. People sometimes ask, what is a poet laureate? And I try to tell them that, you know, this is an honor that's given to writers from the Navajo Nation, a writer who has distinguished themselves through the publications and things that they write about, that honors a nation, that honors a people. And as Luci mentioned, she's the inaugural poet laureate. We borrowed this poet laureate from the Greeks, who honored their citizens with this laureate made out of a laureate plant. And it was like a crown that they made, and they would give it to as an honoring to someone who had distinguished themselves in medicine or literature and so forth. So this is a wonderful honor for me to have this and to represent the Navajo Nation with this. And also want to acknowledge our president, Nez, and Mrs. Nez for being here and supporting this event. It's so very important to have you recognize, you know, who our writers are and the things that we're accomplishing today. I'm going to read a few poems from the book. This one is called Easter Sunday, and it's about gathering with my family up in the Deschenie Mountains, north of Tohe, New Mexico on the res. Easter Sunday. Driving to the mountains at noon through sagebrush and pinon trees, children gather wood, Uncle builds fire, mother and daughters prepare food, flames burning good and hot, coals ready, grill on, push coals around, stew on, stir it now and then, skillet ready for fry bread, watch smoke rise, slap dough into large thin circles, edges lumpy, pull dough, make holes. It's okay. Put in skillet anyway, watch it floating, makes bubbles, turns brown, turn it over, feel heat on face and hands. Grandma scolding aunt, doesn't know how to cut mutton ribs. Grandma fixes, puts back on grill, watch ribs sizzle brown, turn over, drop in ashes, dust it off, put back on grill, hope grandma didn't see. Fry bread stack getting higher, push more coals under skillet. My son moves closer to the fire, raises hand. Hot, hot, he says. Uncle comes, takes him away from cooking. Stew boiling over, hisses and drips into the coals. Take lid off, coffee steaming, grounds bubbling, breeze blowing, carries away coffee smell. Ribs cooked, coffee boiled, fry bread stacked, stew boiled, stomach grumbling, mouth watery, anticipation, plates full, sit down, under tree, family together, give thanks, we eat now. And then this is about one of our sacred mountains, Tzotzit, which is the mountain to the south, which is located near Grants, New Mexico, almost maybe in the center of the state of New Mexico. Okay, this is called Tzotzil, Mountain to the South. You arrive in the bright of morning, carrying music in your eyes and the breath of mountains in your hair. We travel the path of thunder beings, passing above stories where twin heroes slayed monsters. Proof lies in the dark mounds of lava trails, streaming south from Tzotzil, near the mountain where spring begins and calls forth yellow horses to graze among the cattails. I would tell you, beloved, these stories on nights when the scent of orange blossoms linger in the air, would tell you how brave locusts smooth the earth for humans, stories congealed into landscape, and how places mark existence. I want to travel all the colors of the worlds with you, to arrive in this glittering world, held in your swollen mail clouds and your hand on my thigh that causes the world to grow again and again, without fine, without end, your sweet music pouring forth like rain, 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 rain. And then I've been writing some poems in Diné Reader in the Navajo language. I took some classes at Diné College a few years ago, wanting to learn how to become literate in my own language. I grew up speaking Navajo as my first language, and then also learned English at home. And these poems are about rain. This one's the female rain one. Nichts paad shada ate ko tahban doko aljish kos khazli khonez kaza nichts paad betrajol bejavtsa aro nichts paad biyaje bidina nana nil kako nichts paad biyaje khazli chelatra Bojan dat be alche khaja Aro Nihikitnes the Glad. And the English version goes like this. Female rain dancing from the south, cloudy, cool, and gray, pregnant with rain child. At dawn, she gives birth to a gentle mist. Flowers bow with wet sustenance, luminescence all around. So thank you, and may we all have luminescence all around as we move out of the pandemic and make our way going forward. So thank you, everyone, wherever you're coming from. Just wonderful to see some of my friends from other places Zoom in. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate that. I'd like to introduce to you now Tina Deschenie. She earned a business degree from Fort Lewis College and an MA in education and an EDD in educational administration. In 2008, she was given the Governor's Award as the Outstanding New Mexico Woman. She's also served as an editor for the Tribal College Journal, and she was the first female provost at Navajo Tech University. Tina.
Yad she yad katnesa inishle Tohe dlini bashish chin bit ani dashanala kis ani yakinda idashiche Ayaha and saga ohihat anotko kwa hunoslonigi nichil hunoslonigi nihinat ani President Nez donich on ne Phefelia ayaha nichil hunoslo aro da isinot agi do Shik eda na ligo nichil dotra nichi hanne di nal sos bi das zogi nichil do yego Naha ani zi, naha anisin. Dola doshi, nijanago nihi khanit salada la nisin. Aro aya nakaba hinsin khala, nakashina da altagoshi, di de alta yinacha aya. Hashin sago aya nihe inato. Hada shi kata don late nastigo ye kakoshi ye da hunizindoleth. Ako ye gon ha hensin. Thank you so much. I'm very honored this evening to be a part of this event. I am also very grateful to the hosts of the event, the editors, and to the University of Arizona Press, to President Nez and First Lady. Thank you so much for being with us. I love seeing the names of several friends on the list. I'm so thankful to you for signing in. And I am so honored and in awe of the community of writers, my relatives who have submitted work and are included in the Diné Reader. I've been reading sections and I've been just so amazed. I'm so happy about this publication. And I'm also, as well, I want to acknowledge all the other writers out there, Diné writers. Thank you so much. And I hope that we inspire more people to join in this movement toward Diné literature. So thank you so much. By way of introduction, I want to share, before I say that, this morning I read a statement by Anne Lamott. I love Anne Lamott's writing. And she said, publication is about fully accepting your uniqueness and your unique okayness as a writer. And I think I'm in that stage. I'm accepting my unique okayness as a writer and allowing myself to be seen like this in public. And so it's a different time for me. And I'm just very glad to be a part of the process here. These poems I read are in the Reader. I would like to read Near Crystal first. And my heart always quickens at this place. From the south, it's when I see Salah, star lying on the ground. From the north, it's when I see Beshnoshtas, metal fallen to the ground. But especially it's when I see Tsehits, Ozeyaje, little white cone. Among these landmarks, my roots nestle deep in the dark reaches, and a smile always curves my lips. I'm really blessed to live north of Crystal, near Tohe or Whiskey Creek. And growing up, my grandmother always pointed out the highest landmarks and made sure we knew their names. And I've been away from the place for school and work many times. And when I'm driving home on Route 12, I always get so excited about seeing these mountains that I mentioned in this poem. And so that's about home. I also have this poem, next poem, which is about the work that I did most of my life as an educator. I have been so privileged to be able to work with Diné language teachers much of the time. And so this poem is in tribute to the Diné language teachers. It's called We Are Corn. Just last week, a man came and shared sacred old stories of the Diné people with a group of us interested educators. So thirsty we were, we drank in his stories, fortified our souls with the information. At our lunch break, he instructed us to eat some corn-based food. He said, so the stories will stick better and stay with you. After we were nourished in that way, it seemed almost as if our group itself became a field of corn, each one of us an individual stalk with our different colored ears, our tassels long and silky, waving. His words, all in Diné, were the seed, the sun, the rain we needed. And through the stories, we'd grown, become corn itself. Because our language is our corn. our food, our sustenance. And what are we without our language? You know, the Diné language teachers have really hard jobs. Our language is very hard to learn. And I have known the Diné language teachers to be so dedicated to what they teach, so concerned about our language. And so I have always felt like the Diné language teachers are like stalks of corn. They provide the seed that continues our language. And we all know that in these times, in our houses, very few of us speak Diné anymore. And so these Diné language teachers are the ones who are really carrying our language forward. And so I do honor the work of these fellow teachers. And I'm proud to have this poem included. These next couple of poems were written from a time that my husband and I were both in the Breadloaf School of Writing, and we were in poetry classes where the instructor really encouraged and assigned us to read other poets and to be inspired by these poets, and I certainly was. So anyway, I have these poems that I put Navajo spins on. This one is called In the Best of Dreams. It's inspired by this lava Zimborska. In my dreams, I write better than Sherman Alexie. I can sing in Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, and not just about love. I recognize lines from every classic anybody has ever read. At another tribe's casino, I hit the biggest jackpot on record. I can mesmerize. I drum heartbeats on a hollowed out log covered with animal hide. I can run marathons, always in the fastest time, never losing the lead. I ride fast, lathered black stallions, bareback in Monument Valley. I can jump off canyon cliffs and always sink gracefully into the deepest sand. I can see everything in the blackest of nights and days too. I have absolutely no questions. I trust your answers. In my sleep, I always smile and wake up laughing. I am proud to be a brown woman of blood, and I never have to explain that. Some years ago, I saw a flying saucer hovering over a windmill, and just yesterday, a brown spider in stark contrast against the white of my sink. This writer, the one who wrote In Praise of Dreams, really encourages people to dream big. And so this list of dreams, some of them are real dreams that I might have, and some maybe not so much. Some of them are written just for the fun of it. And then the line about the flying saucer hovering over a windmill, that is really true. I really did see that, a flying saucer over a windmill at a sheep camp one time. This next poem is based on Sandra Cisneros's You Bring Out the Mexican in Me. I've always loved Sandra Cisneros. I've loved her since The House on Mango Street. And so I had to write, You Bring Out the Diné in Me. You bring out the Diné in me, that repressed giggle, urge to hide behind the folds in someone's skirts, or to run away, never looking back. But then maybe that's just because you are the one I'd run away to, leave my cluttered house for, give access to my secrets, a few of them at least. You bring out the Chief Manuelito's wife in me, Juanita, the one who stares back from the 1868 photograph, unflinching, the Diné woman warrior in me, the one who could stand her ground against the US Army marching over Narbona Pass, the grinding stone in me, heavy and rough, crushing kernels down to fine white powder, the shit-kicking, ass-whipping, fling you around the dance floor vixen in me, the pounding, mounting, insistent, non-stop arm-deadening drumbeat in me. You do. Yes, you do. You do. You do. You do. You bring out the long walk tragedy in me, the pain of it, the confusion and horror of it, all of it. The uranium mining, coal-fired plant threat in me, the dread of politicians, the emptiness of campaign promises, the lure of quick casino cash. You bring out the onslaught of poverty in me, the reliance on low rent HUD housing and general assistance checks, the numbness of food stamps and WIC vouchers, the fear of talking to my own kids, the fear of their possible arrogance, their possible disregard for all that I believe in. You bring out the cultural struggle in me, the frustration with each new season of TV amorality and movie blockbusters. Shoot 'em up, drink it down, and smoke it up. The hatred for every singer screaming, treat my woman like a bitch. Ah, you do. Thankfully, you also bring out in me the woman who can still roll corn husk smokes, burning her lips to keep little fires sparking at the tip. The fantastic smell of roasted mutton wrapped in soft tortillas in me. The hope of snow-crested sacred mountains. Their names in me, their songs, which hum in me all on their own. You bring out the white shell in me, the turquoise in me, the pollen in me, the first woman in me, the my little sweetie, sweetie grandma in me, the one who longs for tiny hands to hold on to, the Diné woman in me. Yeah, you do. You bring out the slam that damn door shut in me. You conflict me. You bring out the arrogance in me. You bring out the I will fight back no matter what in me. Even though my enemy is sly and cunning, both loud and silent, articulate in other languages, present in body, in music, in words, in print, on screen, in cyberspace, and as oppressive as fog falling from sky to earth, cloaking all like nothing and everything, even so, I will fight back. And I will wait for you as faithfully as the sun and moon trade light and fire and power and oh, all that time. My smile will be sweet and my looks demure, shy. Yeah, right. You bring it all out in me, here. So this poem, you bring out the Diné in me. The list in this poem is about all the things that we Diné are part of. Our history, our culture, our colonization, our conflicts, our grounding, the struggles we have, our pushback, our survival. We inherit these things whether we not want to or not. This is what Diné means. And so it's my tribute to us as a people. I also read in her poem, when she was talking about her poem, Sandra Cisneros said that this kind of poem was about just this whole process of being a writer, how you share everything and how it's all good and bad, and there's conflict and there's some confusion and there's contradiction and there's curiosity in all of the things that we share. And so I think that's part of what it is too. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really happy that you're all here tonight. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tina. That was incredible. You have to check out the chat. It's blowing up.
Oh.
Read about all your new fans.
Oh.
Hey, Kristen and company at University of Arizona Press. I think we need a Tina Deschenie book. All right, thank you, Tina. And you set me up for introducing, in your words, one of the corn people. It gives me pleasure to introduce Irene Hamilton, who's a retired teacher of Diné Bizaad. Irene taught Navajo for nearly 30 years, most recently where she retired from at Kirtland Central High. Her writing was first published in the landmark book, South Corner of Time, edited by Larry Evers and published by the University of Arizona Press in 1980. In so many ways, my colleagues, the co-editors, see that book as a precursor to the Diné Reader. Irene continues to write and publish her work, and if Irene's Facebook posts, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, are any indication, we should all seek Irene's advice on living a fulfilled life in retirement. Irene.
Yeah, oh, yad she tranessa ninshle, mit ane bashchin ado Tapahanso chedo na kaide ne tashinale. Tashino. Yeah, hello. I'm speaking to you from the historical homelands of the Hopi, Zuni, Ute, and Diné. I'm north of the lower San Juan River, Tohe, near our beloved Shashja. When we go on our walks, there are potsherds everywhere, and there's evidence of past habitation. So, the first poem that I'll read to you is one I called Dishwasher. The electric dishwasher has been inoperable for about a year now. The Maytag wonder had finally croaked, choked by mineral deposits or circuits fried. Never minding, I mix a plastic tub of warm chlorinated water, sprinkled with a capful bleach, roll up my sleeves, and looking out at the window at the unfolding vernal vegetation, I rinse the dog-licked slimy bowls. Only bleach takes off the slime, I tell my husband, whose culture has no qualms about letting dogs lick bowls of whipped egg residue. Fondling the plates and cups, I bathe them in soapy water and rinse them and rest them in dish drainer to dry, in their own time. Growing up in the desert, there were no excuses for girls not doing the dishes. Our dear Navajo mother, frustrated, would finally burst out sarcastically, why don't you just put the dirty dishes on the floor and let the dogs lick them clean for you? As it was, in our culture, dogs were not even allowed in the house. So I imagine dogs licking dishes were an insult of high degree. I cleanse my precious kitchenware, bowls that cradled nourishing sustenance, and I remember grandmother's prayers that gave special mention of bed, precious cooking utensils. Outside, an easterly breeze tickles pine branches. The snow has melted. The grass is greening up. Cleansing one's dishes must have been a holy ritual. Heard the dishes across the flowing water. Quickly, the dishes are done. This one I call annual migration. Tunkel go yishat. The ocean's song, always calming. Rushing water and embryonic remembrance. She is loud, rising crescendo, then a crash, repetition. Waves are powerful. A surfer studies to understand rhythms of waves. I am but an itinerant visitor, a novice, trying to understand her melody. Just when I think I'm on to her tune, I am spun off beat and waves slam me down into the churning sandy surf. I land on my feet somehow and spit out salty water and sand. Try again, try again. Once on an early morning walk, I discovered an empty abalone shell, Diné, washed up on shore. I examined it and surmised it had sheltered a wizened old gastropod, Mar Pacifica's ring of fire dweller. Abalone shells, treasured trade items of ancestral world, shells used for containers or carved for ornament. In geological time space, the Colorado Plateau was the bottom of an ocean, as revealed by the fossil record. I return to primeval shores, which have receded during the Anthropocene. The ocean's song always calming. The ocean's song always calming. Story of a Cricket, 1978. Little sister Irene and I were looking with amazed eyes at the blooming desert flowers in the gray rock garden expanses near Kenneth Bitsui. We heard a cricket and we started to look for him. He was sitting under a flat gray ta'awuza, a river rock. Strange, it seemed, that he would be making a noise in the heat of the late afternoon spring. Eileen took the rock off the cricket. The cricket was black and shiny, exposed to the light or interruption. Pardon us. He stopped singing and ran around looking for shade. Eileen put back his roof. The cricket took a breath and resumed his singing. Sometimes I see the black shiny cricket, so suited to have sung the first song of the song of creation. In dark, directionless space, everyone waiting, then one chirp to make an announcement. Kiss! Something is happening. We are becoming Nahakizi. Homeland. This is homeland. In the sand, excuse me, in the salmon-colored sandstone canyon country, in the homelands of my ancestors, behind the mountain they called Shashja, the Bear's Ears, under the canopy of stars during a midsummer's night, I lie in my small camping tent. The thin nylon membrane protects me from the elements, rain, wind, and high desert, cooling night air. I feel safe, even if it is a self-assured deception. Amidst the evidence of wildlife, deer, elk, and bear scat, and mountain lion tracks. Sleep comes easily after a hot day spent in the field, surveying national forest land. What grows here? Who grazes or browses here? Who walks now on this land? Where is their water? We are botanists, biologists, and scientists. Is the land cared for or abused? At some time past midnight, early morning, I am roused by sound, sounds never heard before. Somebody muse. Muse again and again. Mew, mew. I breathe slowly, listen intently, and feel my heart pounding. Breathe. The mewing continues, maybe once every 20 seconds, an occasional pause. Finally, the night trembles as some big body growls. A big cat, mother lion. I listen some more. Seconds, minutes, finally the sounds dissipate. Mother cat and her kittens move on. I go back to sleep, thankful for the visitation of Nashtutso, the mountain lion. They are the guardians of our clan, Tohe, near the water. Ahehe. I am grateful that they still walk the land. And thank you for including me in this event. Right on.
Thank you so much, Irene. It's great to hear you read. It's a first for me. It's hard to pause on some of those first, having spent so much time with your words. It's kind of amazing to realize here we are tonight. One of the things we didn't mention at the outset is that just as tonight presents us with a challenge of including so many of the writers, we can't include everyone tonight. We also had to make some tough decisions. There were so many writers that we could have included, and we hope that this is only the beginning of other books that come out featuring Diné writers. I want to turn our attention now to my colleague and co-editor and good friend, Esther Belin. She was introduced by U of Arizona Press editor Kristen already. I want to acknowledge Esther as the author of the 1999 American Book Award winner From the Belly of My Beauty and 2017's poetry collection of cartography. Her work has been the subject of numerous scholarly articles and chapters. In addition to serving as faculty in the Institute of American Indian Arts Low Residency MFA program, Esther is also currently engaged in a poetry and public spaces project that was first conceived with Dr. Chip Thomas during the early months of the COVID pandemic. Esther.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And thank you for everyone joining us today. Esther Belin, Yanishia, Tloga, Dinanishla, Twitchitni, Bashis Chin, Kitla Chitni, Dashache, Tachitni, Dashanilla. I also, as one of the editors, want everyone to know that all the royalty proceeds from the book, we decided collectively to put forward into supporting Diné writers and Diné literacy, and hopefully, get more writers into the schools, promote efforts of writing, workshops, or just residencies to let other teachers know that there's writers out there that they can use when they teach different units on poetry and English to their students. So we're really excited about that. And tonight I want to dedicate my reading to my parents, who were graduates of Sherman Institute's 5-year program. Their response to that federal policy of relocation and termination instilled a greater drive for me to recreate the path home. And also to all the urban Indians whose resilience continues to contribute to my poetry genealogy. This first poem is called Euro-American Womanhood Ceremony. Some say the boarding school experience wasn't that bad because they learned a trade. At least the men did. The women, they were trained to specialize in domestic household work, to mimic the rituals of Euro-American women, to cook roast beef and not mutton, to eat white bread and not fry bread, to start a family and not an education, to be servants to doctors' families in Sierra Madre, and then to their own. The young women who never really became women because they were taken off the res before they could go through a womanhood ceremony. The young women who adapted to the Euro-American version of a womanhood ceremony. Instead of fasting and sweating and praying and running, they set the table and vacuumed and ironed and nursed and fed and gave birth and birth and birth to a new nation of mixed bloods and urban Indians. And they were mothers, providers, wives. They were strong and loved and made love and sobered up and organized weekend road trips back to the res, back to where we all came from and where we need to return to heal our wounds from the Euro-American womanhood ceremony. And the next piece I want to share, I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see. I don't know if I'm able to. So I'll go ahead and read it. One of the things that I've been doing is working with visual poetry. So I mentioned that my parents went to the Sherman Institute 5-year program, and they, at the time they went, they were around middle school age, and so that was their real major experience with learning English, and so a lot of that focus of what it's like to learn the language in a forced setting away from your homeland, it really is kind of a central focus of my writing in regards to translating that experience and talking about that experience. And so this poem is called X plus X plus X plus X minus X minus X minus X minus X. And I'm using the X as kind of like the link between, but also as a way to symbolize the unknown, right? The addition and the subtraction of things. And mostly identity and culture and language and new identity, new language and new setting. I grew up in the LA area, and it is still one of my homes, as well as Four Corners. There are cries between each letter. The piercing cries of birthing, hot like a mother. The piercing early morning cry of a drunk driver's balding tires. The piercing midday cry of an imploding middle schooler, border towner, cross-blooder, bloody and invaded. The heavy metals in our blood, more bloody than springtime floodwaters. Can you handle hauling water for 500 more years? Yes, 500 more sleepless gaps of memory. Can you find me in the cavern between the letters M and E? The pus-filled gummy sockets of tissue stagnating my voice. The piercing evening prayers, a petition of jackhammer pulses pulsating for loveless, unloving longing for love-filled spaces, quiet spaces of rest, beautified glances, nighttime prayers. And what about the coolness of the evening, the tangle of clouds tucking me into bed, trapping me into my nighttime wanderings, my dusky landscapes of rainbow arced points of entry, seeking shelter, a rest like the shadow from the Most High, a holy mountain retreat. There are seedlings between each letter. Today, I am standing in front of the Creator. I am witness, the slaying of the lambs, the preparation of the meat, fire roasted with tortillas, green chili, and a cheese. My hands are sore, gutting and cutting, tender around the internal organs, tough and fierce at hip joints. My hands are sore, slapping the bleached red winter wheat flour into discs. My hands are sore, cedar splinters embedded, cedar smoke infused, cedar sap veneered. Today, I am a mother in a smothered breakfast burrito, the red chili burning my ass. Today, I am peaceful like a river flow, like a river plugged, like a river dried, like a river rivering, a current currenting, a splash spilling and sparkling skyward, like the river used to flow in me and out, like a soppy addict sitting at the transfer station, a transference of laser-scribed CIB, BIA, tendril insertions deafening the cries, widening the distance between you, me, and home. Today I am emissions of spit swallowed since my birth on a hill down the hall of an IHS hospital. The window holds oceanic groans, a wave of saliva. I swim in utero. I drown on arrival. There are between each letter. Choose the best one from the list below to fill in the blank, then write a haiku to support your answer. Starving Indians, capsules of discovery doctrine, mountain songs, soft goods, traveling songs, mutton ribs, Hollywood Indians, Tutadine. Extra credit. Map your answer on the graph below. East, Doklij, Hlitso, North. There are Jene, other voices, Deschenie, between each letter. Nishant. Between each hollow, each sigh, and forgotten star sayings of and about and how to hold our map waiting in the heavens high above knowing. I can visit them whenever I want. I want is good information, but not enough to divert my gaze from the glittering world tragedies. Allure illusions, allegations of a better than now existence in my shell, dented, toughened from mutiny, mutilation, monstering, mothering, in a standard issued shell, like the language I speak and write and cry and plant with the shoveling motion, imploding to make room for more penetrations, pencil prodders tapping, my flesh, testing my urban smeared blood against the indigenous DNA, tucked into sandstone graves, tucked into denim pockets, like smashed noses into ceilings, poundings like last night's black eye, black door left open to flee like boarding school runaways in transit to checkerboarded houses nestled in tar paper reservation wind, winding won't stop it. Yeah. So it is my turn. I get to honor some of my my colleagues and fellow poets. And it is an honor. It's an honor to be here with everyone tonight. And it's such a good feeling to celebrate our language and celebrate all of the creativity that we have to offer and we have to give so generously. Everybody here has been so generous along the way. So I thank you for all of that. So next on the lineup is Sherwin Bitsui. Originally from White Cone, Arizona, he's an award-winning poet who's published 3 books, Shapeshift, Flood Song, and Dissolve. And he is an assistant professor in English at Northern Arizona University. Take it away, Sherwin.
Hey, okay. Yaad hilchen. Also, die Anjonago Alanalsos Bayad Ilkito Hanedo but I don't know. I'm kind of in between languages, but I'm really grateful to be here. Sherwin Bitsui Inshia Bimpetwani Todich Nashla Tlazlana Bashichin Ki Ani Dash Che Do my dish Gishing Edashanala what I'd Nenshla. Kashinyo Hitch Blagana Kashigo and Hitch Hadis. Thank you so much for all of this, organizers, editors, and also other writers. I mean, and also my gratitude to our Natani, our leader, President Nez and his wife. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for guiding us through a very difficult year. You know, it goes without words. But also, I want to also thank, you know, Luci Tapahanso, Laura Tohe, and all the other poets, but particularly these 2 because they've sort of guided our way and they created this field in a way. I mean, I wouldn't be writing right now if it weren't for Luci, if it weren't for me discovering her work in a bookstore in Flagstaff maybe 30 years ago or something like that. So yeah, should sit Luci. I'm gonna go ahead and start here. I guess this is cue, Jeff, for this piece. And this is a poem I wrote. I mean, it wasn't really even written. It was already there. I think our language, the Nebazad or Nihizad, is really beautiful and poetic already. And I think sometimes all we need is just to remove everything and just to hear it. So I wrote this, and it begins my book Flood Song, and you can probably see it. My eyes are going out, but if you see it, it's the word for water. And I come from White Cone, and I grew up at Osnat, and you know there was a spring up on the mesa between, you know, in this small little canyon, and I just remember how sacred water is out there, and just, you know, water was always on my mind because I was also a sheep herder at a particular moment in my life, and I think water is so sacred. So I wrote this poem, and I do this also in honor of our language, and I hope people are, you know, will enjoy it. So this is Tohe. 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 Thank you so much for listening to that. And then, and I'm just going to read a few poems, and it's a real honor I don't know. I keep saying that, but it is. Whoa, what am I doing? What's going on? I don't want to share any pages that are not necessarily needed to be shared. So this is a poem I wrote, during the pandemic, and it's a small little piece, but I was longing for home. I couldn't go home. It was really, really hard. I lost some family members, distant family members, but luckily my immediate family were safe and we're here. But this is called Amma, and it was about, there was a lot of talk about water also, and how some families didn't have running water. So this is kind of an homage to a memory I have of my mother. Okay, it's Amma. Soap suds lace mother's hands as she slides her naked son into the plastic tub's green hold, a raft run aground on the kitchen table. His eyelashes woven taut against the sting, a wash rag arcing his listening brown back, oil black slick hair pressed flat, the kerosene lamp's white sigh, all adrift in her wind rattled single wide. And so again, I was writing these pieces, I was really trying to, I was going home in my work. I mean, if you know in my work, it is very abstract. And so I was just really interested in seeing what home is like in my poems. I will go ahead and read this other piece because I also, drove my grandfather around quite a bit when he was still alive in the late 90s. And then I just remember him and this Hopi guy, speaking, doing sign language with each other outside of Kemis Canyon trading posts. So this is a little story I have of visiting our neighbors, the Hopi. Strangers in this Mesa Top village, my cousin and I dashed for the car. From a small brick house, a voice, you Navajos look lost, come in, eat. Ladling mutton, squash, and bean soup into their bowls, the man asks, where are you from? Which family? Mutton gristle softening between teeth. I find out long ago my grandfather hauled spring water up to the mesa for this man's family. In the window, light-wrapped silhouettes on rooftops, dancers shifting and chanting below them. The man asks if we want more. Bellies full, we decline, shake his hand. On the walk to the car, chants rumble behind us. Driving back down the mesa, I wonder who my grandfather befriended here. If he had family, old friends, perhaps a lover. I think of the many times my grandfather and an old Hopi man, an old Hopi farmer, carved shapes of corn, squash, rain or no rain, with their brown fingers, rolling and cupping the whites of their palms in the shade of Kemis Canyon trading posts, the language between them planted in another time. And I'll finish with this one. I don't know how many of you guys go to, I think we're all longing to be together again. But this kind of, this poem is not about that, but this poem is about a rescue. And I think a lot of times, we have relatives that are lost in the city. And I think, I think Navajo families, or just Native families in general, have a deep love for family. Like, this is what we do. We make sacrifices for each other. And this poem comes out of this idea of rescuing a loved one in the streets of Albuquerque. I called it the caravan. And I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Albuquerque, but down on Central, there used to be an old Western bar there. And a lot of our relatives are walking those streets alone. So this is about rescuing somebody you love. And the caravan. The city's neon embers stripe the asphalt's blank page, where the story pens itself nightly, where ghosts weave their oily hair into his belt of ice, dress him in pleated shadows and lay him fetal on the icy concrete, the afterbirth of sirens listening over him. We drain our headlights on his scraped forehead and watch the December moon two-step across his waxen eyes. His mouth's shallow pond, a reflecting pool where his sobs leak into my collar. One more, just one more, he whispers, as he thaws back into the shape of Nihitzila, our brother, bruised knees thorning against his chest. We steal away, our wheels moan through sleet and ash. Death places second, third, and fourth behind us. At home on the reservation, father sifts dried cedar leaves over glowing embers. Mother, hovering above cell phone light, awaits, he's okay, never went out, watched a movie instead. But tonight, my speech has knives that quiver at the ellipses of neon Budweiser signs, blinking through the fogged windshield. And I text, I've only rescued a sliver of him. He's only 25 and he smells like blood and piss. His turquoise bracelet snatched for pawn by the same ghost who traded his jacket for a robe of snow and ice. Before inviting him back into the caravan for one more, just one more.
Mm.
So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, Sherwin. Next, we have Orlando White, who I feel is a resilient pillar on the reservation. He's been out there for over a decade, hanging with Diné College and a supporter of Diné poetics all around. He has written 2 books of poetry, Bone Light and Letters. He is currently working on a series of one-word and minimal poems in Diné Passad. So it's my pleasure to welcome Orlando.
Hello, Yate. She Orlando White, that's a Jene. Menished is a Tapahanso Slant Auto, not Kai Diné, but she's chin. Touchy that's a che auto kia ani that's another. Tohle Kanda Ace in the Nasha. Egg out initially. And I just want to give a, here for this, seminal book of Diné literature. It shows, the literary history and the aesthetics and poetics of who we are and where we're from. So thank you to the editors and to the contributing artists and writers who have read tonight, and those of you who weren't able to join us tonight. Really appreciate it. So this first one is the I is a cricket, and this is the lowercase I. The I is a cricket. The book is open. Can you hear and see the cricket. Listen. It sounds as if someone is rubbing the bristles of two combs together. Look closer. Legs are struggling. Like an upside down fly. Like a blinking eyelash. Touch it. And you will feel its tiny hairs. There is a letter on the page. That has bent legs. Before you close the book, let it leap off the paper. Meditation. I listen to the dark zero in my skull. It sounds like ink filling a white dot on a black sheet of paper. Sometimes it is a punctuation mark with little dark wings. It does not fly, blinks like an eyelash. I always wait for the first letter to appear on the page, and when it does, it shakes its fist up at me. At times, language wants to be dressed in a suit, white necktie. But I prefer a pause between ink and letter when words are silent, unclothed. The clock on the wall swallows a fly, and I see tiny legs struggling between the teeth of a number. Somewhere inside the dark, a shadow tries to lighten the dot on the letter I. He rubs it against paper, it smears instead. This is what I like about language, the way one folds sentences and feels the bones of words. Letters crack, then unfolds. Tiny dark pieces that reconnect again on the page. I do not like to go past the period because language resists death. Because underneath bones, subject and verb wait to be revealed. The way one can erase milk to find calcium, the way an erased letter on the page dries into white. The top of the letter I is not a tiny round mark made by or as if by a pointed instrument. It can be a rounded letter, a blank zero, or an unwritten circle. Imagination is an equation. X and Y can be added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided. You were an unnatural birth, she said. I was a letter in the center of an O, born and pulled out, head shaped like a punctuation mark at the sentence's end. This next one is Paper Milk. And this is for my kid, Chance White. Newborn alphabet cries its vowels, and the page nourishes them. A opens into a U that becomes a tiny cup, fills with paper milk. The E, too, unfurls to an O and nurses on a colostrum of pulp. Thought attaches sound from motherese to thin sheet of white. Form, a structure of feeling, an instrument of print means to foster. The verso and recto will be caretakers of our infant text. As writing develops calcium to bring life to ink, letters become collagen of thoughts. And I'll share these brief new works with you. I sort of refer to them as one-word poems, I suppose. Ish, 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 hush, ish, ish. And this next one is sort of more visual, I suppose. Yeah, thank you for tuning in and being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Orlando. So glad you could share the visual representation of your work as well. During your reading, Jake put in the chat that you've been of great influence in shaping future Diné writers. And it's in that context that I have the great privilege to introduce Bojan Lewis, who was once a student of mine at Northern Arizona University a long time ago. Bojan is currently an assistant professor of English and American Indian Studies at the University of Arizona. Among his numerous publications, he's the author of a collection of poetry published in 2017 called Currents. That was also an American Book Award winner. And he's putting the finishing touches on an eagerly awaited collection of short fiction to be published by Grey Wolf Press in 2022. Bojan.
Bojan Lewis in the na khadi net in the shle. Ashi he a bash chin tak na sane e dash che do velagana e dash nella. It's an honor to be here. Coming at you from Tucson, where I live in exile on the homelands of the Tohono and Pasquayaki, who are my neighbors and who I hope to learn from and their ways of being on this land. Honored to be with all you contributors, and like Jeff said, all the people whose work I've read and that have taught me and inspired me, and even the future, like Jake after me. So I have 3 poems for you. Recently became a father of a 14-month-old who I do everything who my life is for. So these are loosely about her, for her. Puzzle 6. Mouthful of raven's bones, eyes black beaks. On our exhausted bellies, we umbilicus to earth. 54mm bullets light up our backs, exit our bellies. Pre-K, St. Michael's AZ, nuns, black scapular and white cowl, shunt milk blood prayers down constricted throats, gurgling cramped bellies. Cienega Maria, St. Poverty, St. Piety, rich with church flesh, give moral accoutrement and seed death daisy garlands with starving bellies. Te hotso, pillows, drool stained, stuffed in cubbies, the body moldy bread. An aspirant summons his penis, signum crucis across our bellies. My memory built against a hill, descending dark corridors, Dios no existe, poetry of broken suns swallowed by a scoundrel, the ruins of our bellies. Shimato shije'e, I'm well. The mirror between us dismembers nostalgia. Dull green meadows yellow, blossoms blurring silent stalkers on their bellies. Puzzle 8. In the PICU, the bow of my right shoelace falls out, linoleum dragged. In the PICU, I count 2 minutes between cries for sucrose-coated pacifiers, 5 for an included TPN, 15 for low oxygen plinth waves, every 4 hours Presidex, sponge baths daily. 7 translucent tubes tunnel, 1 bilious remover, another a respirator sushing the minutes and hours and cc's of weeks we've measured life by. Seated next to a phalanx of infusers reading Bulgakov, disheartened by ingredients needed for a vampire named drink, a pandemic exacts itself outside. Our hair thickens, curls in myth and isolation. Migraine cries muted with sugar water. Saguaro is beyond the window glass, ignore us millimeters by millennia. 1980, I grew the decade with my mother wired and incision stitched. That I'm ineffective against your hunger, I tire, spiral inward toward indifference. Once in Philadelphia, I disappeared to Philadelphia, left for the funeral of my only grandma, returned to a single accomplishment, roof repaired during earthquake, green swirling skies. Choet, nothing much matters other than you are here, the week's week, rubberized beds and other units stripped of sheets, you and I sleep and I see you. And the last one, puzzle 10. Clouds thread through fingers. I dim the lamps and don't sleep. 2 hands cup the moon. Che shouts, stop, Jin. Tides reverse shores, not curses. Blind eye of the moon. Dream blush, heat, and lust. Midnight, the desert flower blooms, dies amidst flashes. Tourists with backpacks bide over wilting petals and extol the moon. The sun dies briefly, all to say, it is night now, and alluvial ghosts gather cactus spines, loose silk of black widow webs, a diode amidst the moon. A wife reads with tea. It's early, soundlessly bright, dust fanned by pages dancing in pulsing light. She stops, sings her child. Dog barks at the moon. Winter solstice, dusk. Sun, Saturn aligns Jupiter. The door shut opens. The dead man appears, skin husked by drought and famine, a transient moon. Dear God, I'm tired of you, who, or whatever. Greed struck you dead so long ago. Our hearts, money, sport, and sex, two-faced like the moon. Like, yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bojan. Next, we have up Jake Skeets, whose debut book, Eyes Bottled Dark, with a Mouthful of Flowers, won the National Poetry Series, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, the American Book Award, and the Whiting Award. He is currently a Mellon Projecting All Voices Fellow and teaches at Diné College in Saley. He has been an integral component in planning the upcoming symposium, Sa'at Among Words, hosted by the brand new Bachelor of Fine Arts in Creative Writing program at Diné College. Join me in giving Jake a very, very warm welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, this has been such a gift. Yes. Shay, Matthew Jake Skeets in Che, Sanadini Nishle, Tubaha Bashes Chin, Skachini Dasha Che, Do Torikojan Dashanella. My younger self would have loved this book, the Diné Reader, would have loved this event. When I was in junior high, I didn't have any friends, actually. I grew up in Vanduagan, New Mexico, near Bajanle. That's where my family has always been from. And I was busing to Gallup, and so Gallup Junior High was my high school, and I didn't have any friends, so I would get in really early, of course. So when I got there, I didn't have anybody to hang out with. So what I did is I ended up going to the library and spent most of my time, in the morning, during lunchtime, and then in the evening when I would wait for my mom to pick me up. I stayed in the library and read books and fell in love with books. And tried my best to learn as many stories as possible. And so it wasn't until my junior year at Windrock High School that I found my first native poets, and Chanela Luci Tapahanso and Laura Tohe were part of that packet of books. And Hill's Brothers Coffee was the first Navajo poem that I read, and I fell in love with it because it was talking about an uncle and the jokes that your mom does with your uncles. And I loved it so much. And I'm trying my best not to get teary-eyed, but it's it's an important book. I loved it. So I'll try not to dwell too much on the harsher elements of Diné literature. I feel like I should end with a sense of joy a little bit. But I'll read this first poem that's in the collection. It's called "Let There Be Coal," and it takes place just outside of Windrock at the coal mine that used to be there. Let there be coal. 1. A father hands a sledgehammer to 2 boys outside Windrock. The older goes first, rams a rail spike into the core. It sparks. No light comes, just dust cloud, glitter black. The boys load the coal. Inside them, a generator station opens its eye. A father sips coal slurry from a styrofoam cup, careful not to burn. 2. Train tracks and mines split Gallup in 2. Men spit coal, tracks rise like a spine when Drunktown kneels to the east. 3. Spider Woman cries her stories coiled in warp and wool, the rug now hung in a San Francisco or Swedish hotel. We bring in the coal that dyes our hands black, not like ash, but like the thing that makes a black sheep black. 4. This is a retelling of the creation story, where Navajo people journeyed 4 worlds and God declared, "Let there be coal." Some Navajo people say there are actually 5 worlds. Some say 6. A boy busting up coal in Windrock asks his dad, "When do we leave for the next one?" His dad sits his coffee down to hit the boy. Coal doesn't bust itself. And this next poem I'm gonna read is inspired by my collection's cover photo. So on the cover of the collection is an Avedon portrait of my uncle, Benton James. Benton, and the photograph was taken in 1979 in Gallup, where I consider also my hometown because I was bussed in every day. And in 1980, unfortunately, Benton was actually murdered in Gallup, and my family received this autographed portrait collection of Avedon's portraits after he had already passed, and so it was kind of like a really interesting moment for them to receive this. And as a child, I remember seeing this photograph, and as an adult coming back home after college, returning back to the reservation, I remember seeing it again. And this poem was sort of talking about this, and this portrait ended up being sort of like the central figure, the central thing that I referred to in my collection as I was trying to grapple with Gallup as a town, a place that we all love and adore, of course, because it holds memories, but also a place that we often fear. Drifter. After Benton James Drifter, Route 66, Gallup, New Mexico, June 30th, 1979, by Richard Avedon. Drift. To drift is to be carried by a current of air or water, but men are not the teeth of their verbs. They pry nouns open with a belt buckle to take a sip. Drifter. A drifter carried by a current of air or water makes his way from one place to another. See vagabond, see transient, see drunk, see a man with shoulder-length hair, dollar bills fisted, standing before a white screen. See his lips, how still, how horizon, how sunset. A train passing through. I tried to hug him through the spine. Left on the white space, his face becomes a mirror. If I stare long enough, my face, charcoal, purse, squinting at the camera. Train horn, punch shatters the mirror, frees him from the page. My uncle leaps from the And I just have two more shorter pieces for you. This one is just a dedication to my cousin brothers, who are my brothers. It was first an essay I was writing about my childhood, about growing up in Vandewagen near Bed Springs and just, being all rowdy, being all res kid out there. It ended up, and after revising and revising and revising, it ended up being only an 8-line poem. This poem is called Eating Wild Carrots with My Brothers on the Mesa. Cicada wane, water and sun race every infinite evening. Fall exists for the dock route to oxalates, each roof of every mouth, each winter with its obsessed wind, each spring that sees storm after storm, each wild that wilds, pasque flowers, opening their palms to straight rain. And I have one more piece for you. It's actually from an essay I wrote last year after this magazine called Emergence Magazine asked me to write an article about the pandemic and how it was impacting Navajo and this idea of apocalypse. And I told them I wasn't comfortable with talking about apocalypse because apocalypse, we think in Diné terms, we think about it differently. We don't think about it like that. So I decided to change it into talking about time and how storytelling and language can bring us together, even though things seem to be far away. And I'll end with this. And I just want to again, thank you to the organizers, Ahiahat, for inviting me here. Thank you to the editors for doing the work to getting this all together. Ahiahat Shinatani, Jonathan Nez, and First Lady Nez, thank you so much for being here and joining us. It's wonderful to see the upper levels of our government here with us and supporting Diné literature. Thank you to my fellow writer, fellow contributors. It's an honor to share this space with you. And I want to just mention that this particular article I borrowed from Luci Tapahanso. Chanela Luci was one of my poetry teachers at University of New Mexico a long time ago. She's the one that told me, don't be afraid to use Navajo in your work. Sorry. And so I remember her reading Far Away for us one time, and I was struck by that song that she sings in Far Away, the story that she wrote. So I thought I'd borrow it for this essay because it was bringing me joy at the time. I didn't want to think about apocalypse or pandemic. I didn't want to think about all that. So this is the ending of that essay. Perhaps time extends from within us and beneath us from our pasts. And because we are in active movement, each moment of present time is actually our future. Our bodies are our future. Our landscape are our future. It's time to imagine a new hope, one that doesn't rely on linearity, one that is deeply intimate, pulled from the deep space and time, one that is birthed from the deepest parts of our bodies. For me, the best way to achieve this is through storytelling. Storytelling has the ability to conjure the deepest parts of ourselves and our relatives. In this way, we can reimagine time and reimagine hope. Storytelling allows us to embrace what is far away, remember what was forgotten. Storytelling allows us to acknowledge the future that exists in our language, on our land. It starts with Al-Kitan, once upon a time. Where's other house at? Where's other house at? Shiga anishne away, hey, far away, far away, Shiga anishne away, hey, yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
What a beautiful way to end tonight. Jake, you practically read our minds. What a beautiful way to end. Chat's blowing up. We do have some time now for question and for some questions. You can pose them in the chat, I believe, given the function, the way the chat function is set up. And we understand we've probably gone way over our allotted time. Feel free to post some questions in the chat.
So I see a question, is there a way to get all of the links into one doc? And I don't know if there is, but thank you, Jeff, for putting together all of the links into one. I'm not sure if there's a way to maybe take a photo of those, or I'm not sure.
I can try to do something right now.
I would really like to know who Bojan and Jake are reading right now. Thank you all for your words. Bojan and Jake, do you want to take that?
I guess I'll go. Right now, Kelly Jo Ford, teaching her in my classes, and Garth Greenwell, and John Murillo.
I have a really long, a big stack of books that I'm reading right now. Things that I've been on so Olio, Team of Jess, Northern Light, Kazim Ali, Dark Braid. I've read it already, but it's a really good collection. Here, Elarath. And of course, I'm reading the Diné Reader, of course, have to.
We're actually at time now, and I think we'll have to close the event. I just really wanted to thank from the bottom of my heart the editors and the contributors of the Diné Reader for your time and your readings and putting this incredible book together. It has been an honor to be sitting here. Thank you, President Nez and First Lady Nez, for joining us tonight. It's been an honor that you've been here. To learn more about the Diné Reader, please visit our website, uapress.arizona.edu. Tonight's event could not have happened without the support of my colleagues at the University of Arizona Press and our University of Arizona Libraries family. Finally, thanks to all of you who joined us tonight. Really the best part of publishing books is the opportunity to share them. So thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, everyone. Good night.
All right.